Good day, everyone, and welcome. My name is Rudy Page, and welcome to another of our Windrush Anchor Dialogues. And I'm really pleased today that we have Dr. Chenzira Davis Kahina, who's the president of the Caribbean Studies Association. Good day, Dr. Chenzira. How are you?
I'm doing exceedingly well. It is such an honor and a privilege to have the opportunity to share in this interview with you, Brother Rudy Page. I've heard so much about you. You seem to have this listenership and viewership that is stupendous beyond measure. And I love persons that place this Caribbean at the center of our human civilization. I love that. So it's just wonderful to have the opportunity to share some updates of our forthcoming conference in June here in St. Croix, Virgin Islands.
Excellent, excellent. And I hope there'll be opportunities for people to join you as well. So your theme, transforming our Caribbean. But before we get into that, can you just tell us a bit about yourself and your background?
Of course, and I pause and I always say I give reverence, I give sacred commitment and guidance to those ancestors that dwelt before me, whose shoulders I walk upon. I ask that the presence of the Almighty Creator guard my words so that they are received in the sacred intention in which I'm delivering them. And as you can feel, I'm in a space where the breeze is increasing in the midst of maroon sanctuary lands here on the cultural capital of the Virgin Islands, St. Croix, known as the crossroads to the indigenous keepers of this land. And I would be remiss if I did not say I give thanks and praise for my mother, Eulalie Bernice Davis, who has been so kind to stay on this earth with us and is 100 as of 2022 to give me guidance so that I speak with firmness, I speak with discipline, and I speak with, again, the sacred intent of what I'm bringing forth. I serve as a griot, to some an educator by training, a creative artivist because I'm quite a revolutionary in intention. I serve as a communications technologist, so it's always an honor to be in the presence of others who carry that particular skill, talents, and expertise as well. I'm also an initiated, ordained priestess of Smai Tawi, Per Ankh and Smai Tawi, and Smai Tawi Renaissance, yeah? I am a published author, cultural heritage preservationist. I've been involved in various curations of exhibitions surrounding Caribbean, global, African, indigenous collections. I am, to some, a visionary, not so much an idealist. I like to look at things pragmatically, but definitely a global visionary. And by training, one of my first advanced degrees was in naturopathic medicine and wellness and counseling. And of course, I serve as a consultant so that I can integrate all of these different areas of training. I am a co-founder of Per Ankh and Smai Tawi Per Ankh University and Per Ankh, which means the House of Life. And our mission is culture, really promoting culture, healing, arts, technology, and spirituality for life, inspiration, freedom, and education. And persons think it's a lot, but that's what indigenous, ancestral, natural persons will do so that we can integrate all these different elements into our workspace. I come from very humble beginnings. My family has groundings in República Dominicana. Some persons like to say Santo Domingo, even though that's only La Capital in the Dominican Republic. And as well as my great-grandparents and grandparents have lineage inside of other portions of the Caribbean, inclusive of St. Martin, Antigua, Guadeloupe, and Martinique. So you see, I'm really a dot of the Caribbean. And then when we go into our great-great-grandparents in terms of our ancestral lineage, it takes us not only into Southwest African areas around the Ndongo region, but it takes us into the East, into spaces where the Bantu, and even as far as some of the Shona, hence my name, Chenzira, coming out of Zimbabwe and other southern portions of what's now known as South Africa. So I'm a daughter of the Caribbean, with indigenous ancestral roots, paternal lineage that is connected to the Quisqueya. Some of the indigenous persons, people like to say Native Amerindian, some say those that preceded the Taino and the Kalinago, etc. And so I'm really a blend in terms of my own ancestral legacy. And I am engaged in a number of works that are connected to things that are sometimes considered socioeconomic and grounding, sustainable environmental solutions in work, and definitely to some quite political, just in terms of being involved in social governance that is liberating, that is unifying, and that supports indigenous ancestral African people. That's the short version.
Okay, excellent. And I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more about that as we go along. So how do you define the Caribbean from a geographical perspective, including the diaspora?
The Caribbean, as I've shared with many other persons, and again, we can speak of this in an intellectual space capacity and just speak of the different isles that are inside of the Caribbean Sea. However, the Caribbean is much more dynamic. It's much more inclusive. It's much more interdisciplinary. It's much more engaging in terms of a variety of ethnicity. While there's a grounding in indigeneity, yes, but there's persons that claim that this is like their home space for not just centuries, but for millennia upon millennia, because we know that there are persons that can show that tie, whether it's through archaeological, anthropological, ancestral.com sites, etc., to show a tie to being connected to these spaces we call the Caribbean that include the isles inside of the Caribbean Sea, but it also includes those larger spaces in what we know now as Central America, southern portions of Mexico, the southern portions that people refer to as the Black Atlantic, and the south of the Portuguese contiguous US. It includes South America because there's a connectivity in terms of the ethnic groups, the entities that traverse through the Caribbean Sea, and some that traversed on the other side of Central America on the Pacific Ocean, and as well as those that traversed in the Atlantic Ocean and into wider expanses of space. It also has to do, when we speak of the Caribbean, in terms of its geographic as well as its geodesic placement. And I say this sitting in a space called the Virgin Islands of the United States. So while we may have a political connectivity as being part of the United States, we are geographically, ethnically, spiritually, culturally tied to these Caribbean spaces. And many of the minute you ask somebody where their grandparent is from, much less their parents, it's going to take you through this entire region that we speak of. So it's not just the islands, it is all of the spaces that abut, surround, and embrace the islands as well.
Okay, that's great. So you're the current president of the Caribbean Studies Association, and of course you've been a member for several years. Can you share with us some of your most memorable experiences with this organization, which is 50 years old next year?
Next year, we're so honored to be able to celebrate 49 years. There aren't too many Caribbean associations, period, that can claim that they have been able to keep that type of unification and type of engagement for 49 years, moving into its 50th anniversary in 2024. And from very humble beginnings, and I need to share that, about 300 Caribbeanist scholars, graduate students gathered in 1974 to really establish the CSA, the Caribbean Studies Association. And I encourage persons as you're listening, if you want to get like the real detail, then just go to CaribbeanStudiesAssociation.org. And that way you can find out a little bit more, where the conferences have been conducted, how do we go from different parts of the Caribbean, inclusive of these spaces that I've just mentioned. And more importantly, when you ask that question, what are the more memorable portions? I'm one of those CSA members and currently serving as president that's really passionate about all things Caribbean. So we have hashtags like all things Caribbean studies, all things CSA. And we always are looking for ways to get our graduate students, as well as our undergraduate students, and of course, secondary elementary students, to see the importance of the Caribbean at the center of civilization, because you can find people from the Caribbean anywhere on the earth doing fantastic work anywhere in the earth. And not to say that everyone is doing everything perfect, and we have some that we may not want to bring in the family all the time. However, by and large, we really have a lot that we contribute out of these Caribbean spaces that are changing the globe, changing the earth, presenting achievements par excellence, and of course, are involved in all the building blocks that keep civilizations running efficiently, smoothly. I can remember in 2013, one of the very memorable CSA conferences. It was hosted in Grenada, and it was hosted in Grenada on the 30th anniversary of the invasion in Grenada. And it brought together persons from both sides of that invasion in an academic space. So while we were in the spice capital of the Caribbean to some, and the history was very telling to the heart, I have to say that there was a shared humanity that was exhibited amongst intellects, amongst academicians, amongst revolutionaries, amongst those that were either capitalists, communists, socialists, artisans, and of course, persons involved in the legal areas. And of course, military presence that was on high, just because of the nature of the gathering. But what stuck in my soul was the way in which we were able to interweave perceptions of what happened in 1983, with the New Jewel movement being completely put down, how people healed from that over 30 years, and how we were able to move forward so that we maintained a resilience and a respect, even if we had differences. It was a harmony of peace, some challenge, but it stuck in my mind. Like that made me just know I was going to stay in CSA like forever, because I thought it was amazing that persons were able to get through this academic experience that was really grounded on something that really affected people and their lives and transformed Grenada and has impacted Grenada to this day. And well, at that time to that time, but definitely into current spaces. And of course, there were conferences that were hosted in, everyone wanted to be in Haiti. It was like over 1,000 delegates that, converged in Haiti and were able to really give back into that community. It was so well supported by the educators and academicians there that despite all of the chaos transpiring in Haiti, which is, we are very clear on in 2023, there was again that synergy of the academic engagement, the intellectual exchange, cultural heritage opportunities, policy development, arts and sciences to govern the universe, and ways that we could actually contribute to helping restoring balance and order inside of Haiti. So those stick in my mind. And then I can also talk about when we were in Cuba, and everyone was, again, designed to be in Cuba because many persons had never had an opportunity to travel to Cuba, but to see the support of the Cuban government and of course their universities, like all of them were so grateful to be participatory in this opportunity with CSA. And it allowed for us to learn the truth, or different truths, I should say, of what has transpired inside of Cuba. I mean, it's hard to pick like one memorable, because right now I am excited with what we're about to embark on, because in 49 years, this is the first time that the Caribbean Studies Association conference is being hosted on the Isle, which serves as the cultural capital of the Virgin Islands here in St. Croix. So I think I'm going to have a different response after June 9th.
Excellent, excellent. And I look forward to a dialogue with you post the event, and you can give us some feedback, and that would be great to do that.
Look forward to that.
So you've touched on it, but can you kind of set out the purpose and aims of the CSA itself?
Oh, of course. And I like for persons to recognize that while it is an independent professional organization, it is an academic association, it is really devoted to the promotion of Caribbean studies, essentially, the promotion of Caribbean studies. And whether it's from a interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, multicultural, transcultural point of view, it's inclusive of all of that. And the primary focus of this association is for scholars and of course practitioners that work in the Caribbean region. And again, as I said earlier, and I'm so glad you asked that question, not only on the Caribbean islands, but including Central America, including South America, and all of these spaces, Mexico, that the Black Atlantic South and the 48 contiguous US that are within this Caribbean coast, Caribbean sea space, right? That's essentially what CSA is about, yeah.
Okay, okay. So over the years, over the last 49 years, as we've discussed, what have been some of the most positive gains for Caribbean people?
What's very interesting is many of the persons in the early years that were involved in presentations, came as graduate students or young scholars, and then of course becoming seasoned scholars and CSA, either have become heads of state in the Caribbean or other parts of the world, have been involved in jurisprudence or serving as barristers or legal counsel in respective governments and institutions, have established entrepreneurial corporations or institutes of higher education, and have served in higher education administration posts and so forth, have become award-winning film producers or directors, have become award-winning literary scholars or literary agents, or connected to publishing houses within the Caribbean, because that's something that we're always pushing, that we are Caribbean Studies Association. It's important that our journals, our publications show that support, reverence, and respect for scholarship and publication inside of the Caribbean space, right? It's not to say that you don't get things printed elsewhere if it's cost effective, et cetera, but we spend a significant amount of time making sure that our publications, to the best of our ability, are published inside of these Caribbean spaces to give the same credence and support and validity as we would to Europe, America, Canada, and other parts of the world. And it's also very important inside of CSA, the international linkages that we've established with institutions of higher education outside of the Caribbean that are focusing on Caribbean studies, Caribbean arts and sciences to govern the universe. We have expanded our reach not only into spaces like Canada and the 48 contiguous US and Central and South America, but also Europe, also Africa, throughout Asia, and inclusive of the island that people like to call a continent, Australia, yeah? And it gives us an opportunity to show that CSA is quite global. We have had delegates that have come and presented literally from every corner of the earth. And many times, while they may come and their primary language may be French or Spanish or English, and in some cases Portuguese or Papiamento, we make sure that we provide as many, we have a translingual crew that works on ensuring to the level, almost to the level like the UN, but that we're able to deal with translation and transliteration as it's necessary so that all of our members can be engaged and that people feel free to be participatory. This is why we're always encouraging people, persons, even if you don't come to the conference, at least become a member of CSN. Right. Share with us what you're doing that supports Caribbean studies, and share with us what you're doing that honors Caribbean spaces and Caribbean civilization, wherever you are, right?
It sounds like it's impressive, and it sounds like a very important archive, knowledge pool, place of learning people can use for their development and progression, to compete in the wider world.
Yes, yes.
And I would imagine that you also would have a good deal of influence on the creative industries, the creative and cultural industries within the Caribbean itself.
It's interesting you go in that arena, because the theme for this year, the short version, because academicians can be very long-winded, and we're working on cutting that down so we can Twitterize as much as possible. So you'll see like hashtags for transforming our Caribbean. However, there's 5 areas that we're also inclusive, that are inclusive in these particular proceedings. And one is around sustainable educational research. One is around cultural creatives and the artists therein. The third one is around sacred traditions. And the fourth one is around economic development, and particularly sustainable economic development. And then the fifth one is environmental solutions, because all of this will not matter if our earth is not taken care of and able to sustain human life, right? So we're really navigating around environmental affairs, economic affairs, cultural creative arts, as well as sacred traditions. People forget this sometimes, that spirituality piece is the thread that really keeps us harmonized and unified in these Caribbean spaces, wherever we are. And then, of course, making sure that we're looking at the economic development, economic policy, and so forth. So we have presenters, we reached out this year, which was, again, we're much smaller. This is our first face-to-face conference since we were in Colombia in 2019. And of course, didn't have conference in 2020 due to the global pandemic. And then we had a hybrid in 2021 hosted by the university in Guyana. And we had a completely virtual one hosted by the University of the West Indies in Mona Campus, Jamaica, last year in 2022. And so this is something where we've had over 250 applicants that submitted abstracts, and after the reviewing process, which of course we had several scholars that have expertise in these different areas, as I've shared, and it came down to about 118. And so from that pool of 118, we've got several films that are going to be screened that are grounded around Caribbean studies and Caribbean themes. And those producers and directors will be sharing, again, the intellectual fervor that's connected to their work, but also screening their respective films. And then we have several creative artists that are going to do performing arts pieces that, again, are connected to the Caribbean studies and the linkage of how do we begin to tell our own narratives, right? That was one of the criteria in that particular piece. We are hosting a Caribbean cultural night, and that cultural night, while we're in St. Croix, will give people a nice cross section of the cultural traditions of St. Croix, which are magnificent, not because I'm here, just because we bring a professionalism and a passion to the importance of seeing how the Caribbean cultural nuances are here in St. Croix, as well as the wider Virgin Islands. So persons will be exposed to our national Kwelbe music, quadrille dancing, Bambula traditions, Makwajumbi traditions, stilt walkers. They'll be exposed to the masquerading tradition, some of our carnivalesque and festival activities and so forth. And of course, music that crosses quite a few different ethnomusicological spaces and places. So, those are some of the ways in which we'll be bringing that. And as we're continuing our conversation, Brother Rudy Page, I would love to share a snippet of what we did as a pre-CSA conference convening, and we did a television production that will be featured during the convention, and where we highlighted one of our keynote sacred tradition presenters, and that's none other than Dr. Marta Moreno Vega, who is the founding president, of the Creative Justice Initiative, and I can speak to that more a little later.
Excellent. So, and what I like about, we always like this, people like myself who are involved in policy implementation. From the academics, we want clarity and definition.
Yes.
So the 5 areas that you indicated, I think are excellent, and I'd like to see that we can actually follow those through the work that we're doing around the broader Caribbean Commonwealth as well. I think it's excellent. And those definitions are coming from, the intellectual rigor, academic prowess from within the Caribbean itself. So for us, that's great connectivity. So look forward to following that through,
Well, we have an opportunity, like we always host different, there's like certain, I guess the term is signature events. And there's, that was interesting. I'm sitting underneath a mahogany tree that just gave me a sign. So that's good. This is very good. See, it's a piece of mahogany. So which ancestor that was, I'm grateful. So that tells me what I'm supposed to continue to say. The intention of the CSA conference, that's like our main event that we host every year. And we make sure that we have, there's various literary book awards, for example, that are highlighted. And I would love to share some of those. But first, we have author celebrations. So whichever authors have published, like in the last year, we give them an opportunity. Of course, the process is vetted. They submit an abstract around their particular publication. And of course, things that are tied to Caribbean studies. And then those that are coming, in this case, in physical space, they will be able to share, have some of it vetted by their colleagues, and then give like an excerpt reading from their respective work. And so we delicately put that throughout the different events and sessions. Most of our sessions this time, this year, we're going to have 6 to 7 concurrent sessions, and they're going to range between 8:30 in the morning until like 5 in the afternoon. And the intention is so that people still have some time in between to actually see and experience St. Croix, which definitely is a vibe like no other, right? That gives persons an opportunity to see some of our cultural heritage sites, because St. Croix has been designated by the US and specifically through the Department of the Interior and with some guidance from the National Park Service and other agencies as a national heritage area. Not one site on St. Croix, the entire 84 square miles. And that's very rare. So it gives the CSA 2023 delegates and their guests and families an opportunity to experience this national heritage area and to learn a little bit more, not only about the colonial history, but about the pre-colonial history, about not only enslavement, but around the free Africans and Blacks that were here and developed and contributed to the quality of life here in these spaces that we know now as St. Croix, during whether it was Danish times, French times, British times, because there are several flags. And then of course the indigenous presence, what persons like to refer to as Native Amerindian, whether it's the Taíno, Kalinago, Quisqueya that pass through, Garifuna that pass through, those that come across the Ofrinco River, those that are connected to the Igneri, which before many of them, those that go back to the Siboney. So it gives people an opportunity to experience that we have a ceremonial indigenous bate right here in St. Croix that not even Columbus was able to penetrate, because they chased him from here in 1493. And we have these markers and, a lot of other history, fire burns of 1878, labor uprisings, and, things that our people did with resilience, power, and strength. So the persons don't think that everybody was enslaved and it was only separation. We shift that narrative to a more accurate one so that we can speak of our humanity. Yeah.
And that's important. And again, that going back to the clarity and definition, but understanding the cultural communication throughout the ages is really important as well. So that's great to hear that.
Absolutely.
Absolute place of learning. The Caribbean is a place of learning, which is great. So, you've touched on some of the highlights. So just before we close, are there any other particular highlights that you really feel people should know about? And then how can people get in contact with you, websites, etc.?
Well, I would really encourage persons to go to the website, Caribbean Studies Association, all lowercase, one word, .org. You can also look for Caribbean Studies Association on Facebook as well as YouTube. On YouTube, you'll see some of the more current videos that I'll share with you, like very short promotional pieces of what's coming forth in CSA 2023. Persons can email me at president@CaribbeanStudiesAssociation.org. I know it's long, but that's one way of reaching me. Or you can look for me on Chenzira Kahina, CHENZ as in Zaid, IRA, K as in kite, AHINA, on any of the social media. And I'm pretty easy. I'm usually the only Chenzira Kahina in those networks. That's my suggestion. And I encourage persons to go to the website, look at some of the promotional videos, look at some of the typos of some of the conference proceedings and preparations. This year is also the 175th anniversary of Virgin Islands Emancipation. So even the 175th Virgin Islands Emancipation Commemorative Commission is one of our prime sponsors, right? We have been having support from the Office of the Governor and in general from the government of the Virgin Islands, whether it's the Office of the Governor, the Virgin Islands Department of Tourism, the Virgin Islands Lottery Commission, there's so many different, the Virgin Islands Department of Education. There's been a very serious, engaging, supportive connection, if you will. And we've reached out to other entities. We've had, the Company House and the Caravelle Hotels provide a signature hotel space and even open up more reasonable accommodations at this late date for persons that have just made the decision to come to the conference physically here in St. Croix. We've been fortunate enough to have the St. Croix Community Foundation, the St. Croix Foundation for Community Development, You see, sometimes we just call it the foundation, but under the direction of Lady President Deanna James to really assist us with just having some of the logistics and engagements, brought forward. We've been supported by the Dr. Simone Palmer Wellness Center. And again, they've been at the core of just assisting us and making sure that when people come, that they can have a very welcoming, a very supportive, a very engaging experience. And there's others that have provided support in always small and large. The fact that these convenings are being hosted at the University of the Virgin Islands, Albert A. Sheen campus on St. Croix. And I want to be specific of where, not in just the main campus, but we have gotten platinum sponsorship for all facilities from the Research and Technology Park at the University of the Virgin Islands under the direction of Director Peter and his staff. And then we've had some partial support from the university's Medical Simulation Center. And this is a relatively new, not relatively, almost brand new conference facilities that have just opened up, from the latter part of 2022. And they've made, some other, and so there's a lot of support that we're still engaging. And there's a lot, and we encourage persons, as I've mentioned, the Creative Justice Initiative was one of our first sponsors, right? We were very, under the program chair, Megan Sylvester. Persons in Trinidad and Tobago know the sociologist, Calypsonian researcher par excellence. She stepped forward and served as the program chair for this committee for CSA 2023 with a team that's stellar. And of course, we have right here with us, Sharon Paris Chambers of the Carib Newsroom, and Let's Do It in the Caribbean, that actually facilitated this interview and has served as our communications consultant par excellence. I went Jamaica, helping people here in St. Croix. So we're very, very appreciative, very grateful. We encourage people, again, you've got my email. If you don't find me, find Brother Rudy Page. I know he knows now how to find me. And that way we can stay in touch, and we encourage persons to come participate, embrace. We know that there's no secret that the Caribbean culture is at the center of civilization. We know we're undergoing another renaissance. Be part of the renaissance, Let's transform our Caribbean with actionable deliverables. I'm gonna say it again, not just talk, but with actionable deliverables, so that we can improve the quality of life for us, our elders, and definitely the future generations that we're doing all this succession planning for. So come, experience CSA. We welcome you.
Excellent. And I like the last parts about deliverables, because we say implementation is key to attainment.
We're gonna use that. I will quote you.
No problem.
I will quote you. Implementation.
It's key to attainment.
Implementation is key to attainment. You will hear that again. I thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. Great to meet you, and I certainly look forward to post-conference feedback in a few weeks' time. We'll do this again.
And I appreciate the opportunity. Once we have the links, our plenaries will be live streamed on the Caribbean Studies Association YouTube page. So we will share those links with you so that you can share them, at least a week in advance. So the persons that just want to kind of tune in for at least the plenaries will be able to have that opportunity.
Absolutely. And we give you commitment. Fresh FM Radio London will rebroadcast all your content. This dialogue also will be rebroadcast across the network over the next few weeks. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, you take care and all the best.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.